Welcome to Converge 21. This is a dynamic global event designed to strengthen connections within the coaching community and offer cutting edge learning opportunities. This is a presentation that's part of the work piece of the day. And work is all about inspiring those interested in building a coaching culture within their organization. My name's Kevin Campbell. I am a coach and people scientist with Lifted Leadership. I was 10 years old when I got the call that something happened to my mom. I wasn't sure exactly what went wrong, but I was able to piece things together after hearing her and the other adults talk about what had happened. She was a single mother working 12 to 16-hour days to support my 3-year-old sister and me. She was great at what she did, but at some point it just got to be too much. And she had a nervous breakdown. On her last day at that job, she crawled out on her hands and knees, dripping in tears and sweat from emotional, psychological, and physical exhaustion. A short time later, she fell into a deep depression, which led to a series of events that led to us losing our home. From that day forward, I vowed to make the world of work better for people like my mother, because I know that better workplaces not only mean stronger businesses, but it also means stronger families, healthier children, and stronger neighborhoods. Now, contrast my mother's experience with your best day at work, a time when you knew exactly what was expected, a time when you felt fully capable and in control, a time when you were appropriately challenged, and yet you felt like you were doing what you do best. Now, imagine being able to spend the majority of your time at work in that state. That's the promise of employee engagement and performance management done right. And the key to unlocking that promise is to be found in you. It's to be found in those of us that would call ourselves coaches. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. At the end of our time together, you will be able to explain what employee engagement and performance management are and why they are critical to business success. You will know how to identify the ways most organizations structure employee engagement and performance management programs. And you will be able to describe the impact of coaching on the success of employee engagement and performance management. And most importantly, you will learn some simple, practical tools for fostering coaching-based performance and engagement conversations. So, what is employee engagement and performance management? Employee engagement is an emotional and psychological state. It starts with emotional commitment. It's employees' emotional commitment to stay with their organization and fulfill its objectives. It's not just about being committed to a job because you feel stuck or obligated, but because you feel connected. Employee engagement is also about discretionary effort. Employees' willingness to go above and beyond and give their best work. Even if they're not part of the maintenance staff, engaged employees will do things like pick up trash and keep the workplace clean on top of their regular duties. They will help out their fellow employees and put in extra work, not because they're forced to, but because they want to. Employee engagement is also about psychological connection. Employees' pride in their organization and their willingness to recommend it to others. When there's a psychological connection, employees will encourage their friends and family to apply to open jobs at their company, and they'll leave great reviews on sites like Glassdoor and Indeed. The processes most often associated with employee engagement are surveys, and they include things like yearly employee opinion surveys, short quarterly pulse surveys, employee life cycle surveys like onboarding and exit interviews. Performance management, on the other hand, is a process. It's the process organizations use to clarify expectations by setting objectives in support of accomplishing the strategic goals of the organization. This is usually done through goal-setting techniques like SMART goals, key performance indicators, or objectives and key results. Companies also use performance management processes to foster growth by helping individual employees learn and grow, as well as help improve overall organizational performance. The processes often associated with this are things like check-ins, 360 reviews, or peer feedback. Last, But certainly not least, organizations use performance management processes to measure and review employees' actual performance and behaviors compared to desired performance and behaviors. This is often done for the purpose of rewarding accomplishments, by facilitating performance-related changes in pay and providing guidance to potential promotions, or to create accountability by having a record of interaction for compliance, should they have to have conversations about poor employee performance or to justify dismissing low-performing employees. This process is often associated with things like the dreaded performance reviews or performance appraisals. The reason I'm addressing both of these concepts in tandem is because they're so closely linked to each other. There's what we call a bidirectional relationship between engagement and performance. And that's just a scientific way of saying that when people are more engaged, they perform better. And when they perform better, they're more engaged. Also, performance management processes are an important part of the employee experience, and they have a big impact on employee engagement. Research has even shown that employee engagement is a strong predictor of customer loyalty, employee retention, sales, and profit. So the takeaway here is that employee engagement is a mental state and that performance management is a business process. And most importantly, that they both impact each other. The reason that's important is because you can't really do one well without impacting the other. So whenever you hear discussions about performance, always think about how engagement might be impacting what you're seeing. And when you hear a discussion of employee engagement, be sure to draw the connection to individual and business performance. At a time when many employees are quitting their jobs and safety is on everyone's mind, it's easy to see why employee engagement matters to businesses. The Gallup organization found that employee engagement gives businesses more of what they want, 17% higher productivity and 20% higher sales. And it also gives businesses less of what they don't want, 70% fewer safety incidents and 24 to 59% lower turnover. And I would argue that this should matter to coaches too. Not only are you helping protect employees' well-being, but it is estimated that the total addressable market for employee engagement related products and services is $44 billion with a B dollars, and it's growing. According to the survey firm Qualtrics, nearly 9 out of 10 companies are measuring employee engagement as of 2020. And 8 out of 10 plan to invest and focus more on employee experience this year and moving forward. The reason this is important to people involved in coaching is because it is a growing market where businesses need help. And as part of our time together today, you will learn how to help them. And as you probably guessed, performance management is another huge opportunity that matters to the business world. Deloitte found that when performance management is optimized, organizations are 1.3 times more likely to reach their financial targets, twice as likely to innovate, and over 3 times more likely to encourage risk-taking and effectively manage change. This matters to coaches because nearly every company has some sort of performance management process. According to the HR Institute, 90% of companies have a performance management process of some kind. More importantly, over 2/3 of those companies plan to make changes to it. The reason this matters is because, as you'll see, many of the changes that companies want to make to these processes will require coaches and coaching skills. So the next time you hear someone talking about changes to performance management, be sure to mention the impact of coaching that you're going to learn today. So now that we've talked about what employee engagement and performance management are and why they're important, let's talk about how most organizations approach these topics. Most companies go about setting up an employee engagement program with HR taking the lead. They create a survey-driven program to measure employee engagement, and the responsibility falls on top leaders to take action. And they usually take action by creating large company-wide initiatives. In the standard approach, the whole purpose of the program is to gather feedback so that leaders understand what employees are thinking and feeling. Unfortunately, the standard approach has major pitfalls. When the program is only led by HR, it becomes seen as a quote unquote HR thing, and business unit leaders often lose interest. Surveys are great for measuring employee engagement, but employee engagement is not a survey. The survey is just a tool for measuring the psychological state of engagement. Company-wide initiatives are essential to improving employee experience, but those big changes can take 6 months to a year to implement, which seems like a long time for a seemingly simple survey. Ultimately, this focus on understanding is a good place to start, but it misses the mark. Without action being taken, the whole program loses credibility and ultimately lowers employee engagement, the very thing that it was built to bolster. And that's why, according to Qualtrics, in 2020, even though 89% of companies measure employee engagement, only 7% of employees say that their company is very good at acting on their feedback. That represents an 82% gap between measurement and action. There's nothing more frustrating than being asked for your opinion and then having it be ignored. There's a huge gap here when it comes between measurement and improvement. And as you'll see, coaches can, and I would argue should, fix that gap. As for performance management, the standard approach to implementing these programs is very well intentioned. For instance, 80% of organizations' performance management programs include a discussion of work goals. But when it gets down to their managers, only about a third of them are good at setting those goals. The vast majority, 71% to be specific, of companies create performance reviews in order to help their employees grow. But in reality, only about 1 in 3 are seeing their programs result in any development for their employees, let alone improve performance. And while it makes sense that having a performance program in place should help boost communication, unfortunately, only about a quarter of HR professionals say their managers are good at having these performance conversations. You see, the underlying theme here is that most companies are good at setting up programs, but those programs are not helping them reach their intended goals. The gaps are around good goal setting, improved performance, and communication. The good news is that coaching, as you know, is all about goal setting, improved performance, and powerful conversations. As mentioned earlier, nearly every company has some sort of performance management process, but less than 1 out of 10 are meeting the goals of that program to a high degree, which represents an 83% gap that you, as coaches and people that are increasing the use of coaching within your organizations, are able to help fill. Beyond the numbers, this is what these statistics sound like in the real world. Employees say things like, we fill out all these surveys, but what the heck does the company do with this information? We have a lot of channels for feedback, but I don't know if it actually changes anything. You might also hear some things along the lines of, my manager got mad at the team for giving him honest feedback. This performance review process feels so unfair, it's demotivating. These performance reviews take so much time and all they do is make people feel bad. We want to invest more in development, but we don't have the time. It is hard to give honest feedback because everyone feels so defensive. And ultimately, people are left wondering, is anyone really listening? You see, the problem with most employee engagement and performance management programs is an overemphasis on measurement over improvement and development. The good news for us is that the solution to filling that gap is coaching. Take this statistic, for instance. The analytics firm Gartner found that employees who report to managers who are good coaches are 20% more engaged and demonstrate 19% more discretionary effort at work. What do you think? Do you think that stat is true or false? The answer is that both statistics are actually twice as high. It's false. Employees who report to great coaches are 40% more engaged and demonstrate 38% more discretionary effort at work. The reason that this is important, because if you want to translate employee survey feedback into engagement and effort, it takes coaching to make it happen. What about this stat? Member data from the coaching platform BetterUp suggests that coaching can improve individual performance by 52% and team performance by 68%. What do you think? Did I make this one up? Is it true or is it false? Once again, it's false. And again, both statistics are twice as high. Their data suggests that coaching can improve individual performance by 104% and team performance by a whopping 137%. Again, we see here that the best way to move forward from only measurement to significant improvement is coaching. Given that, what do you think of this statistic? According to Burson and Associates, 70% of organizations claim that they coach their employees. Now, you might be skeptical at this point because I've given you a few false statistics, but what do you think? True or false? 70% of organizations claim that they coach their employees. Well, this one is actually true, except only 11% of leaders actively participate. The great news that I'm exceedingly optimistic about is that there is a better way. And many forward-thinking organizations are closing the measurement to improvement gap through coaching. They're doing this through a number of ways. Many are doing this by partnering with external coaches like myself. And this is not completely new. Executive coaches have debriefed leaders on their 360s for a few decades now. But what is new about this is that some organizations are having external coaches coach frontline leaders and managers on their own manager effectiveness and employee engagement surveys. I worked with a large Chinese restaurant chain where every single restaurant manager was debriefed on their employee engagement results with an engagement trained coach. I also worked with a professional services consulting firm that transitioned their performance process to be more strengths-based. And in preparation for that, they had every one of their managing directors spend 45 minutes with a certified strengths coach. These forward-thinking organizations are also bridging the gap by creating teams of internal performance and engagement coaching champions. I'm currently working with an organization to certify a team of business unit leaders and come up with a way for high potentials to become internal coaches so that coaching and action taking becomes embedded as part of their culture. And last but not least, these organizations are enabling managers to take a more coach-like approach with their teams so that their conversations are more engaging and they actually improve performance. So we've talked about how the problem with most employee engagement and performance management programs is an overemphasis on measurement over improvement and development. We also talked about how the solution to bridging this gap is coaching, either with external coaches and or a mix of internal coaches and equipping managers with coaching skills. Now we're going to unpack two very simple and practical tools that you can use today to start having and enabling these conversations. The first is called Engagement Coaching is as easy as ABC and 1, 2, 3. By ABC, I mean action-oriented, business relevant, and conversation-based. Let's start with unpacking what it means for engagement coaching to be action-oriented. Too often, organizations focus on big changes that take a lot of time, money, and effort. This means it could take 6 to 12 months to take action on a seemingly simple survey. And it's easy to start too big, even when common sense tells us that we're better off starting fast. When we push to improve the employee experience all at once, the ensuing excitement and motivation can lead to grand visions that may or may not produce results. The way to counteract this tendency is through a framework that was inspired by James Clear called Think Big, Act Small. Basically, when you want to make an organizational change related to survey results, scale down your initial plan to something that can be done right away with the buy-in from just one person, just yourself, or your immediate team members. And be sure to evaluate the impact of that action. So for instance, you might see that development is an area of opportunity on your employee engagement survey. For many organizations, they might leap into creating a company-wide mentorship program to address this, which is incredibly hard and expensive. So you might consider piloting a mentorship program first, but even that is hard. Instead, why not start with a small group of high potential employees? Or maybe you just take it upon yourself to mentor a single person. Or better yet, commit to having a single mentorship conversation today and seeing how it goes and learn from that experience. The idea is to make the culture change that you want to see as easy as possible to start. What you want is a gateway action that naturally leads toward a bigger change. You can figure out the small actions that lead to big changes by drilling down on your big changes from very hard to the very easy small actions that you can take today. Creating a global mobility policy is very hard. Creating an internal job portal is hard. Convincing your managers to hire from within can be moderately difficult. Convincing one manager to consider internal candidates for just one role is easy. Encouraging one person to apply to an internal job is very easy. Let's say recognition is an opportunity area on your survey. Creating an enterprise rewards and recognition program is very hard. Buying and implementing a new rewards and recognition software platform is hard. Setting up a yearly recognition event for one location or department can be moderately difficult, but making it a point to recognize others is easy. Sitting down and writing one heartfelt handwritten note is very easy. And you know what? One handwritten note is not only easier, it's often more effective than some impersonal program or software. Another part of being action-oriented is to foster the right mindset. When it comes to engagement surveys, managers can be defensive. But the key to overcoming that defensiveness is to shift the focus away from blame and onto action taking. Rather than coming up with excuses for why things are the way they are, or blaming things that are outside of their control, coaching can help managers focus on what the next action needs to be, how to make that happen, and how to make things work better. Even if 90% of the problem is outside of that person's control, coaching can help focus them on the 10% that they can own. So now that we've uncovered and unpacked the A in ABC, let's move on to B, business relevant. Even though employee engagement leads to increased sales and profit, many leaders struggle to see how it connects to their specific business or their specific team. It often feels like extra work. But by being business relevant, we can help draw a clearer line between business goals and employee engagement results. To do this, sometimes it's helpful to begin with the business goal or business problems that are keeping the managers up at night. Ask them, what are your goals? And what makes those goals important? Then, after articulating the business needs, we can turn to the survey for insight and ask, what does the survey say our area of focus should be? Finally, we can create business relevant actions that align to both the organization's business goals and the engagement survey's focus area. As an example, let's say you're working with a sales manager whose goal is to increase sales. Without any engagement data, that leader might decide to purchase some sales training for her team. However, if her business goal is to increase sales and the focus area from the engagement survey says that she should focus on collaboration, then the relevant action might be to have her team do a team building event with the marketing team to increase collaboration and ultimately increase sales due to increased cooperation between the two teams. Or let's say that sales manager who wants to increase sales finds that tools and technology are an area of focus on her engagement survey. Maybe all of her salespeople are using outdated spreadsheets, or even worse, they're using paper to manage customers. And then maybe for her, the answer to increasing sales is to look into some new customer relationship management software. The new software will save her salespeople time by solving their issues with tools and technology and ultimately increase sales. Finally, let's say the sales manager who wants to increase sales finds that learning and development is a focus area on her engagement survey. Her salespeople don't know how to follow the sales process or answer objections. Then maybe for her, the answer is to increase sales through finding a good sales trainer. The sales training will give her salespeople the learning and development they need to close more business and ultimately make more sales. The key here is not to say that business is the only thing that matters, but to reinforce the idea that what is good for meeting employee needs is also good for business results, By making that connection explicit, employee engagement no longer feels like extra work on top of all the quote unquote real work. It starts to feel like part of getting the real work done right. Now that we've covered the B in ABC, let's move on to C, conversation-based. Too often, leaders will take the results of the survey, go into a room by themselves, and come up with a plan without ever speaking to their employees about the plan. Conversation-based leaders, however, take a coach-like approach to unpacking results. For instance, if the focus area from your employee engagement survey is recognition, then a great conversation starter with the team might be to inquire into recent achievements by asking, what achievements do we have to celebrate? Or you might ask a single team member, what is the best recognition you've ever received? Or let's say the focus area from your employee engagement survey is learning and development. Then asking a great conversation starter with the team might be to inquire about how they want to develop. You might ask something like, what are some ways we can develop as a team? Or you might ask a single team member, what is something you'd like to learn? Or maybe alignment is a focus area on your employee engagement survey. So as a conversation starter, you might inquire about expectations by asking, what is expected of us as a team? Or you might ask a single team member, what do you think you get paid to do? The idea here is that instead of making assumptions about what employees mean, we ask them. And we ask them in a non-confrontational, non-defensive, and conversational way, like a coach. As coaches, we can encourage and model how to ask powerful coaching questions rather than problem-solving consulting questions. So instead of asking something dry like, what topics should we discuss on the engagement reports, we can ask, what is important about engagement to you? Instead of fact-finding with a question like, what is your company's vision statement? We can ask, what does it mean to have a vision? Rather than getting into the weeds with questions like, what learning and development options are available, we can ask, what are you excited about learning? You see, this is important because a few subtle shifts in the way conversations are framed can create a much richer and deeper conversation about engagement. So we want to encourage managers and leaders to have a more conversation-based approach to these topics by helping them foster conversations through powerful questions. Now that we've covered the ABCs of engagement and engagement coaching, let's talk about the 1, 2, 3. The 1 stands for determining one focus area for your team. We need to resist the urge to do all things. We want to focus on just one thing that has a strong link to business priorities and addresses the most important engagement gaps. In the words of Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, never half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing. 2 stands for taking 2 relevant actions. You want to do something that you can act on right now, right away, and then follow up and see if it works. Based upon the results of that action, you can do more of it, or you can pivot and do something else. Last, but certainly not least, is 3, which stands for 3 by 3 communication. This means communicating what actions were taken 3 times through 3 different channels of communication. Unfortunately, not everybody checks their email as often as we'd like them to, and they don't always look at the employee portal. So make sure it gets mentioned in meetings, in one-on-one conversations, and through platforms like instant messaging and Slack. So yes, engagement coaching can be as easy as ABC and 1, 2, 3. All it takes is for coaches to encourage leaders to be more action-oriented, business relevant, and conversation-based in their approach by focusing on one area, taking 2 actions, and communicating what they have done 3 times through 3 different channels. Now that you know how to take a coach approach to engagement, you're ready to launch into performance conversations and how to make performance conversations flow. It's no secret that performance reviews can be anxiety producing. Employees are worried about what this conversation means for them, and managers are worried about their employees being resistant to feedback. The antidote to this kind of anxiety is the flow experience. For those of you unaware, the flow state is characterized by an intense and focused concentration on one thing in the present moment. It's a merging of action and awareness. There's a loss of self-consciousness in a sense that you're really in control of your actions. It's a sense that one can, in principle, deal with the situation because they know how to respond to whatever happens next. There can be a distortion of time where time feels like just a few minutes, but actually several hours have passed. People experiencing this find it intrinsically rewarding, often so much so that it's just an excuse for engaging in the activity because it allows them to operate at full capacity. Rock climbing, playing chess, whitewater rafting, all of these activities can be conducive to experiencing flow because they're designed to make optimal experience achievable. They have rules that require the use of skills and learning. They have goals and ongoing feedback, and they facilitate concentration and control. Any activity can produce flow, and any activity can produce anxiety and boredom. It's the balance of subjective challenges and subjective skills that influence the quality of the person's experience. It's not about doing something that's so challenging that you experience anxiety or so easy that you experience boredom, but about finding that perfect balance. There are a few conditions that foster flow. You need to have clear and unambiguous goals. You need clear feedback so you know how you're doing in relation to those goals. And you need to feel well developed enough to meet those challenges, but not so skilled that you get bored. And sure enough, those are the exact same things that performance management programs are attempting to achieve for organizations. They want people to know what's expected, measure how well they're doing relative to those expectations, and foster growth so that people can meet those expectations and develop the right skills. Which is why I created the flow model for performance management coaching. The flow model is based on the acronym FLOW. F stands for framing the client situation. L stands for learning through feedback. O stands for owning strengths and opportunities. And W stands for working toward effective action. Altogether, the flow model is a way to have performance management conversations that flow and produce performance and flow as a result of the conversation. For those of you familiar with the GROW model might be asking, why use a new model? Why create a new model? Well, there are a couple of reasons why GROW might not work as a model in this situation. First off, in performance management, the client might not be coming to you with a goal that they've already had in mind. Instead, the conversation might be happening because of the cadence associated with the performance review cycle. So instead, the goal might be to frame the situation so you and the client can co-create a shared agenda. Also, in the GROW model, the client gives their assessment of the reality of the situation. However, in performance reviews, the feedback that people are receiving from others is not necessarily in line with the client's view of reality. But it is still valid information to foster learning. In GROW, the coach and the client brainstorm options to bridge the gap between the client's goals and the reality that they're facing. However, in performance management, the client needs to first own up to whatever parts of the feedback they feel is relevant to their situation. Flow still brainstorms options, but it's addressed more often in the final stage of the model, which leads us to W. This part is actually quite similar in both models and deals with moving forward and taking action. So let's unpack F, framing the client situation. This is where you want to foster a shared understanding of what this conversation means to them by outlining the purpose and process of the conversation. When done well, it creates a safe environment for feedback. The key coaching skill used in framing the situation is setting and holding an agenda. The key question that you want to answer for yourself is, what are you and or your company hoping to accomplish with sharing this review, sharing this feedback with this person? Before doing anything, it's going to be important for you to first articulate the answer to that question. Then, once you've laid out the purpose of the conversation from the company's perspective, you can work on co-creating an agenda that also includes the goals of the client. If, for example, the purpose of the feedback is just to help that person receiving the feedback learn and grow, and this conversation is not necessarily going to impact their pay, then you absolutely want to specify that. You might say something like, at the end of our time together, my intention is for you to generate at least one new insight into your leadership style, and one thing that you can do as a result of that insight that can help you get where you want to go. Then, after clearly sharing your intention, it's helpful to identify their focus for the conversation. You might say something like, if this is going to be a good use of time from your perspective, what do you want to walk away with? Given that this coaching conversation is likely to be one that wasn't necessarily initiated by the person being coached, they might not always have a goal or intention in mind at the outset, and that's okay. But you want to do your best to help them articulate something that they hope to gain. You might say something like, on a 1 to 10 scale with 10 high, where are you right now in relation to where you want to be? And then ask them what it would look like to improve by saying something along the lines of, what would it look like if you went from a 7 to an 8? In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these powerful questions, but here are some powerful questions that you might use at this stage in the model. A couple that stand out to me are, what do you have left to achieve? And where are you in relation to your goal? After you frame the client situation, you want to move into L, learning through feedback. This is where you'll help them gain awareness of how their approach, behaviors, and working style are perceived by others. This stage is challenging because it's where you actually debrief the feedback with them. And feedback is funny because it sits at the intersection of opposing but related human needs. The need to be accepted exactly as we are, and the need to be challenged and grow. The need to be autonomous and independent, and the need to belong as part of a group. The need to honor others' opinions while also retaining the right to disagree with them. Our need to feel validated as human beings, and our need to be challenged in order to learn and make progress. The way to balance these needs is to reframe feedback through different lenses. Adults learn when the information they're receiving is seen as relevant and useful. So it's important to position all of this feedback with their aspirations at the center. For instance, if they're critical feedback that says the manager is too nice and too collaborative, and yes, I've seen feedback like that, that might be okay. That's okay feedback if the manager's goal is to increase collaboration and psychological safety on their team. For instance, you might try a meta view by looking at the big picture or an expanded perspective. You might pull them back from their immediate issues and ask them something like, what will this situation mean for you a year from now? 5 years from now? What about 10? You might also try putting a positive lens on some less than positive feedback. Sometimes our greatest strengths are found in our opportunities for improvement or in underappreciated or overused strengths. The visionary might be seen as ungrounded. The decisive leader might come off as bossy, or the nice manager might be seen as weak. For example, let's say you have someone that's gotten feedback that they're aggressive. You might say, maybe you're not an overly aggressive person. Maybe you're a passionate person who allows your passion to get the best of you. How can we make your passion work for you rather than you working for it? Just by virtue of being another person, you have the ability to provide another perspective on their feedback so they can learn from it. When they're able to re-examine that feedback from different viewpoints and look at that feedback from different angles, they're able to see possibilities for learning. You might try saying something like, imagine you were to zoom out and see your life from a bird's eye point of view. What would you see? Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over all of these questions, but some powerful questions that you might ask during this stage of the model are, which comments reflect the effort that you've put in already? Or which, if any of these comments, are a concern for you being able to perform at your best? After you've enabled learning through feedback, you want to move into O, owning strengths and opportunities. This is where you'll help them determine which parts of their feedback they want to completely own and take to heart. Owning strengths and opportunities requires a strengths-based approach. Believe it or not, working on weaknesses and opportunities can also be done in a positive strengths-based way. Take the following metaphor. I borrowed this one from Robert Biswas Steiner as an example. Imagine you're in a boat in the middle of a lake. Your goal is to get to shore. You have 2 paddles and 1 leak. Now here's the question. Do you focus on your paddles, your strengths to get to shore, or do you focus on plugging the leak, fixing your weaknesses so you don't sink? Well, the truth is it all depends. How big is the leak and how far is it to the shore? If the leak is small and the shore is close, then focus on your paddles, your strengths. If the leak is big and the shore is far away, then you want to focus on your leak, your fatal flaw, so you don't sink. It all comes down to thinking about your strengths and opportunities in the context of your goals and situation. And throughout all of this, it's important that we nudge our clients into a place of positive emotional resonance, because that's the state of mind where creativity and problem solving occur. Ultimately, we want to help them become more resourceful and more fulfilled. And your job is to bring them to a place of high emotional resonance, because before you get them into problem solving mode, so they can start to see what their options and opportunities are. So this is where it's really helpful to share your observations with them. So for example, you might use the fundamental coaching skill of articulating what's going on by saying something like, I could feel your emotions shift in a positive direction when you began talking about that presentation that you gave at the conference. When they take the step of admitting to a fault, it's an opportunity to acknowledge their willingness to own an opportunity. When that happens, you might say something like, it takes a lot of courage to admit that you've struggled with listening to others. And it's clear that you care deeply about your team and that you want what's best for them and you want to improve. And let's face it, the truth is that performance reviews are never 100% objective. And that's inherently unfair to some degree. When that happens, humans are going to react with all kinds of emotions. So it's important to normalize being human by saying something like, anyone in your situation would feel exactly the same way. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over all of these questions, but some powerful questions that you might ask at this stage of the model are, what areas of your work are going particularly well? Or tell me about a time when you performed in a way in which you didn't think you were capable. If you're interested in any of these questions or have any follow-up, feel free to reach out to me. Now that you've empowered them to own strengths and opportunities, you want to move into W, working toward effective action. Awareness without action is like tasting food without swallowing. All that marvelous insight and discovery from this feedback will be useless, and results and change won't occur unless that information is put into some sort of action. It could be a physical action, it could be a mental action. There is no right way. However, what's critical is that something happens. Otherwise, that insight and learning will be lost. It's helpful in this stage to deepen the learning by asking something like, of all the things we talked about, what's the one thing you want to be sure to remember? Then, if it feels appropriate, ask for permission to go deeper by asking, would it be okay if I challenge you a little bit? Oftentimes during performance reviews, people feel the need to have an action laid out for the person being reviewed. But that's not always the case. Often it's more effective to throw it back to them by saying, I would challenge you to put that insight into action in some way. Sometimes to really make it stick, you can ask them about what I call filmable behavior. If I were to watch you put this into action, what would I see you doing? What would be the filmable behavior of that action? When that is done right, this model can help people move away from performance conversations that focus solely on measurement and move them toward future actions and improved performance and development. So I hope you appreciated our time together today. To recap, the problem with many employee engagement and performance management programs is an overemphasis on measurement over improvement and development. And the solution to this problem is us, is you. It's coaching. Forward-thinking organizations are bridging that gap through external performance and engagement coaches, creating internal champions, and equipping leaders to take a coach-like approach toward their teams. And you can enhance engagement and performance using two very easy to understand guides. Employee engagement is as easy as ABC, 1, 2, 3, and performance conversations that flow. If you've enjoyed your time with me today, I really, really want to hear from you. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, let's connect. My name, once again, is Kevin Campbell. I'm a people scientist and executive coach with Lifted Leadership. You can reach me at kevin.campbell@liftedleadership.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me through my website. Thank you and have a great day.